UK.
This is Times Radio Breakfast with Stig Abel and Asma Mayer. It is 9:35. Now, we love your questions, and what we love even more is trying to answer them by asking people who know. This morning, we are speaking with Major General Rupert Jones, who was once the UK's most senior commander in Iraq, tasked with eliminating ISIS, and who you will have heard on Times Radio clearing a path through the fog of war. We want your questions on the military side of the conflict in Israel. You can text us on 87222 starting with the word Times. You can tweet us at Times Radio. Send an email to Molly, our producer, on studio at times.radio. You can also watch along on YouTube, and you can put your comment or question in there. Good morning to you, Rupert.
Good morning.
This is a very pivotal moment, really, in this conflict. And I suppose many people really want to know. The reason that they want to know this, the military side of stuff, is because they want to get a sense of how long this is going to go on for. The longer it goes on for, obviously, the more people are dying in Gaza. And obviously, we still have to remember the 1,400 people who died in Israel and the 220 or so hostages that are still there. How do you see the current situation? The latest we heard from the IDF yesterday is that they kind of cut Gaza in two. They want to encircle Gaza City. How do you see the current situation?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tragic situation, isn't it? And we're a month in today, which already gives you a sense of timelines. These things just take a long time. So where are we? As you say, the Israeli Defense Forces, they are into the Gaza Strip. It still feels though they're setting the conditions, by which I mean they've kind of cut off northern Gaza City, but they haven't broken into the real heart of the city yet. So it still feels though we've got a long way to go in pure military terms before you even look at the politics.
And when they say they want to encircle, or they're going to encircle Gaza City, with what?
Well, in this instance, they're helped by the sea. So on one side there's the sea, and on two other sides there is, if you like, Israel. So by advancing across the Strip and cutting off northern Gaza Strip from southern Gaza Strip, they've to some degree created a little area that they can fight in. So that it is then, if you like, cut off from southern Gaza. It means civilians who are trying to get out of northern Gaza now have to come through Israeli positions. Now, of course, that is on the face of it difficult, but what that does mean is the Israelis can check people coming south to make sure there aren't Hamas fighters hidden in amongst innocent civilians.
So we've been asking for questions, and here is one. It's nice, actually, if you put your name on the end of it. This is about Hamas. What is Hamas doing in the war? How are they fighting? Other than holding the hostages, we hear very little about them. We only hear about how Israel is conducting the war. So what do Hamas fight with?
So Hamas they're deeply embedded within the Gaza population and within Gaza City. That's why we hear so much talk of the tunnels. They're of Gaza, if you like. And what we don't hear very much of is what's happening to Hamas in the battle. So we don't hear, when we hear about Palestinian casualties, which are awful, what we don't hear is how many of those are actually Hamas fighters, because some of them, of course, will be. We hear from the Israelis when they strike a commander. What we're not hearing is about how many Hamas, what you might call foot soldiers, are being killed. Hamas are, it seems to me, playing a bit of a waiting game at the moment. They're still striking into Israel. They've launched about 6,000 missiles themselves at Israel in the last month. Most of those get intercepted. Some sadly detonate over Palestinian civilians. I think what's going to be interesting as the battle goes on is the degree to which Hamas stay and fight, or whether they try and slip away using the tunnels, hiding amongst the civilian population, and try and slip away to fight another day. And of course, for the Israelis, that's a problem, because they said they want to eliminate Hamas, and if Hamas fighters slip away, then they haven't been able to do that.
This story, this question chronologically goes a bit further back, but Tony has asked, we know what happened on the 7th of October. What happened on the days and weeks before the 7th of October that left Israel so exposed to attack, given that they have a huge defence budget? Are we any clearer on that?
I don't think so. And I suspect it's reasonable to say that the Israelis won't really close with that until after this war, whatever that looks like. The Israeli military chiefs have been quite transparent in putting their hand up and saying there were military failures. And I think what they're more or less saying is, look, we will fight this war and then we will probably fall on our swords and step aside. We will take accountability. That is not what you're getting from Prime Minister Netanyahu. He's not taking any accountability. There clearly were very significant intelligence and military failings that led up to the 7th of October. But I don't think we're going to get, if you like, the details of the inquiry until slower time.
Dee asked the question. Look, keep your questions coming in, by the way. 87222, starting message with the word Times if you want to text us, or you can email studio@times.radio. We had Simon Clarke on earlier, and he made the point that there's a risk this is going to become a free-fire war, effectively, where Israel have said, if you're in North Gaza, if you're in Gaza City, and you're a man, you're effectively a potential Hamas fighter, and therefore you're fair game. And Dee asked the question, how do the IDF differentiate between a Palestinian man and a Hamas fighter?
And there's the nub of the problem, and it's incredibly difficult. And this needs really nuanced judgments. I mean, I have to say, if I was a father in Gaza City, I would have left some weeks ago. And the reasons that people will have stayed in Gaza City will be many and complicated. But by staying, you are leaving yourself potentially vulnerable to the question you've just asked.
If you're a man, if you're a man of a fighting age.
Absolutely so. And so potentially you might be a dad of a young kid. So there are judgments that people are having to make. How do the Israelis make those decisions? Well, they've got intelligence that predates this current war, and they'll still be using that. It's not as though they've gone in cold. And they will have, over the last month, been expending huge amount of surveillance and other intelligence effort to build up a current picture of where Hamas are. So they'll know as to the best degree they can, where the big infrastructure locations are. Where are the Hamas headquarters? Where are the tunnels? And then they'll be using techniques such as communication signals and the like to try and identify these locations. But it's very, very difficult.
Do we know, someone else has a question, do we know how big Hamas is? We've heard numbers like 30 to 40,000 people, but what does that mean in real terms on the ground? Are they people who support Hamas? Are they people who would pick up a gun for Hamas? Are they people who would control a cell for Hamas? What do we mean by Hamas figures who are legitimate military targets? Yeah,
but I think the figure 30 to 40,000 is probably helpful because you've got to have some kind of sense of scale of it. So 30 to 40,000 seems a reasonable figure. But as you say, what does that really mean? Because there'll be a relatively small number of senior leaders, the head of the organisation. So what are the remaining tens of thousands? Well, they are fighters of some description. Some will be really very extreme. There'll be, some of them, of course, mounted the attacks on the 7th of October, through to, if you like, part-time fighters almost, who will take up arms. They've had some training. So, they're not a formed military organisation. They're a militia.
Do they have to have a gun in their hand to be a legitimate military target in that sense?
They don't have to have a gun in their hand at the time that they're struck to be a military target. If the Israelis have intelligence that proves that they are an active participant, then they
have been,
then they are a potential target. So maybe they're involved in Hamas logistics, or they're in a headquarters, but they don't need a weapon in their hand. They are still potentially a legitimate target.
If you're watching this on YouTube, you can put your question into the chat bar and we'll pick some of them. There's a few more to go through. Just at the beginning, Rupert Jones, I said that you were once the UK's most senior commander in Iraq, tasked with eliminating ISIS, which is echoes again of exactly what the IDF have said to us for weeks now, that they want to eliminate Hamas. And I know we've kind of already gone over this, because some people will say, well, hang on a sec, that is actually impossible, because you don't know who Hamas are, as we've talked about already. And also, if you are bombarding a civilian population, then those children necessarily may grow up and become Hamas sympathisers. So is this just the kind of It's just the kind of the set language, the set kind of rhetoric that's used when you come up against people like Hamas, that you talk about eliminating them, knowing full well that actually you probably can't.
Yeah, I mean, language is really important, isn't it? So in the counter-ISIS, the counter-Daesh fight, we really talked about the military defeat of ISIS. And when you looked at that particular organization, to defeat them, you had to destroy them. Now, you can sing a dance or make a dance between what's the difference between destroy and eliminate. I mean, there is a nuance there. I think the big difference with ISIS was that they were outsiders. So if you take Mosul, it was the Iraqis taking back their sovereign city, the second city of Iraq. So there was a difference. In the case of Gaza, it's difficult, isn't it, that word eliminate? Because if you're a senior Israeli general, how do you interpret that? How do you turn that into a military objective? And how I equate it is what the Israeli military need to do is to destroy Hamas to such a degree that they're no longer an effective military force that could mount the sort of attack that they mounted a month ago, at least in the medium term. That then becomes an objective that the military can do something with. Because as you say, eliminate, you can't eliminate an idea, as people always say.
Yes. Quite a few people on YouTube are asking about the hostages. Kat Lou, is freeing the hostages a priority for the Israel government, or is the priority raising Gaza to the ground where the hostages apparently are? Similarly, Marian, according to Hamas, 60 hostages were killed because of Israeli bombings. That's what they say. How much of a concern are the hostages really for Israel?
I think they're a huge issue for Israel. And we've seen how the Israelis have in the past traded a great many Hamas fighters to get one hostage back. So I think we non-Israelis should be cautious of making judgments about how the Israeli government, Israeli people are viewing their hostages. I think they have a challenge because they're trying to balance two missions that at times conflict with each other. One is, as we've discussed, is a military objective to destroy Hamas to the maximum degree possible, whilst concurrently trying to get their hostages back, and that's very difficult to do those two things in balance. But I think we should be cautious of judging how the Israelis are approaching their own people, because it's clearly a bitter scar for the Israeli people.
Here's an interesting question from Catherine. What's being done to track down and apprehend the Hamas leadership who are in other countries such as Qatar? If Hamas, which it is a proscribed terrorist organisation, if it is the sworn enemy of Israel, if it is responsible for this, which it all is, how can they sit in luxury and impunity in Qatar while people are being bombed in Gaza?
And this begins to get to the heart of these issues, isn't it? And we've seen it in other campaigns with the Taliban and others where their leadership were outside of the country, to some degree immune from the war. And that may feel wrong, but equally, you've got to be able to at some point negotiate. You've got to have a dialogue. And at the moment, people are quite understandably focused on the fighting, but behind the scenes, the diplomatic community, the United States, the Arab nations and others are furiously trying to find a path through this. And to do that, you do need to have somebody to negotiate with. And I don't think any of us would wish to see the war expand into Qatar and elsewhere.
But there's no way they could send, when they got bin Laden in Pakistan. Is there any world in which Israel send in a special forces squad to take someone out in a different country?
There is certainly a world where that could happen. As you say, other militaries have done that. The United States have, conducted counter-terror operations in Somalia and all sorts of other places. So it's certainly a possibility. Indeed, the Israelis have mounted attacks into Iran in the past because Iran wants to eradicate Israel and they've got a nuclear program. So Israel have struck into Iran in the past. So it is not inconceivable that could happen. I'm sure there are some cool diplomatic heads advising the Israelis that would not be a sensible thing to do at the moment.
Someone here is asking about Israeli military casualties. Do we have any idea of what they are?
Well, quite a number of the people who were killed on the 7th of October were, of course, military. Since they went into the strip, the latest figure I've seen is about 30. Israeli soldiers killed. I mean, that's everyone is a tragedy, of course, but those are very low numbers compared with what they might suffer when they get into the heart of the fighting. And, we should view this as almost the foothills. They're in the kind of outer perimeter of the city. They haven't really gone into the guts of the city, if you like. As a comparator, the degree to which it's helpful, the Iraqi security forces during the liberation of Mosul suffered 10,000 casualties. Now, once you get into close quarter street fighting, we've just been talking about how hard it is to identify a Hamas fighter. Once you get into that close quarter fighting, it's very, very hard for the Israeli forces, and we would expect to see them suffer more casualties, which, of course, is why they're trying to do so much work before they go into the city itself.
I see. Major General Rupert Jones, thank you very much. Thank you for answering all the questions. He was once the UK's most senior commander in Iraq, tasked with eliminating ISIS. Been answering your questions. It's been on YouTube, and you'll be able to watch that back later.
9:51. It's a big day in politics today. More on that with Kate McCann in a moment. This is Breakfast on Times Radio with Asma Mir and Stig Abel in association with Service Now.